registration marks. Take my bullnose chisel, make sure you knock these down nice and flat. Pay attention to the grain. So the grain's running this way, carving nice and smooth. But if you turn the block and you go this way, you could chip out your little pieces. So you always make sure you're paying attention to the grain, and it changes. So once I've gone around and smoothed out all the large pieces, come back, make sure some of these really delicate areas are cut away gently so I don't chip them out with a large chisel. I'll make sure I go in there, clear that a little bit, and I'll come back with a smaller chisel so I have more control. Make sure that's not chipped out. And then I'll work my way around the whole design. I think that's it. So this block shares two colors. It's the last color block, it's the darkest. So now we just have to wash off this design. When I wash off the design, I usually just take a spray bottle, spray that, and I have this horsehair shoe brush, which is really soft, and I'll just brush the design off. I'm also brushing off the glue, which is a water-based glue. So I just rinse that a few times. But it's important to use a soft brush so you don't knock off all these little bits and pieces that you left from the carving. Should be good. Again, this is just a birch plywood with a 3/16 thick piece of American cherry, and it's glued on water resistant wood glue. So after that's washed off, I'll just dry it off and let it air dry, and then we'll be ready for printing. If you've been following along, the last color we printed was this reddish dark tone for the birds, and obviously you can see that this is a beach scene now, and I really enjoyed the grouping of these birds and how they're all looking in one direction, the waves breaking, and a real generic sky. We have arrived at the last color block, which is shared. See, this was the last red color printed, and this block is shared with, it's going to be not quite black, but a transparent dark, and I think it'll be a little bit cooler than this last red, as I like to overlap cool and dark to kind of get an interesting color combination. So we're going to mix up our colors. We have a Payne's Gray, ultramarine blue, and an earth red, and that will make up our black. I'm also going to be mixing a transparent base, which is just the oil with no pigment in it. Gotta love those cars. Sounds like gunshots. So as I'm mixing my color here, I'll get my sample sheet here from last time, and I can compare the tone. It's much darker, as you can see. I think that might be good. Just have to mix in some transparent base. This is Gamblin transparent base. So the way this works, there's always a film on the top. I just peel that back, take a little bit, it's probably good, twist it, mix it in, then you just kind of push that dried flap back down, squeeze out the air, and put back on the lid. But I don't put the lid down all the way because it's almost impossible to get off. Set that aside. Once I have my color mixed, just kind of work it back and forth, make sure it's nice and smooth. We'll be using a small brayer or roller for this one. Always clean your palette knife very well. I have a test sheet here so we can see what the color looks like on paper. I call this warming up the ink. And then we'll test the color. Now that's a nice gray. And if we look at our birds here on the shore, our seagulls, you can see that that would be a nice little color overlay, I believe. So let's test this out and see what it looks like. We'll start to ink this block. We don't want to over ink. But we also don't want to put too much pressure on it when we take the impression. So I have a really small light ball bearing, which these are barely raised off the surface at all. I have my cover sheet, so it'll slide over. And I have a test sheet here, which is just plain copy paper. This block here is so that the paper doesn't flap over when I take the impression. Gently apply pressure. And this is supporting the paper here. That whistle is the Metro North. It's at the end of the block, and it goes from here to Grand Central in New York City. And there we have it, the final color for this beach scene. I'm not sure if this will be dark enough, so let's print it on this test sheet. I'm using a new microphone for the audio. Hopefully it sounds a little better. If you follow me along for this whole project, I'd like to say thank you. I'd like you to consider following me on YouTube. Also, seeing some more of my work on my website at stevenwieniecki.com. You can also find me on Instagram at stevenwieniecki. So let's take this impression, see what it looks like. I'm not pressing hard, just nice and gentle, keeping it flat, letting those little ball bearings do the work. There we go. I'm wondering if it needs to be a little darker, so I might mix a little bit more blue into this, a little bit more Payne's gray to make this darker. We don't need all this pigment. Take that away. I'm just going to mix this up. It's a very small area that we're printing. That other train you hear is the #1 train, which is, and that just goes downtown all the way to Battery Park, the south end of Manhattan, where the Staten Island ferry is. It's a local train. It makes all local stops from Van Cortlandt Park all the way to Battery Park, where you can hop on the Staten Island ferry, take a free boat ride from Manhattan to Staten Island, and then back. I think I'm happy with that. Let's test it on a piece of paper that I'm using for the edition. This time we're going to be using our thin, transparent Goyu Japanese paper, handmade. See, there wasn't enough pressure. I may need to change to a standard Baron. The registration is really good though. I'm looking here in the legs, the heads and the beaks of the bird. Switch Barons. So we'll do that again. When you lay this down, you gotta be really careful. This paper's very thin. There we have it. Now this is a limited edition, so there will maybe be, depending on how many come out, maybe 12 of these for sale on my website. It's a fun little print. Perfect timing for the end of summer.